The heat of late August always sat heavy in our kitchen, thick and yellow, smelling like old coffee and the cheap citrus cleaner Mom used on the counters. I was 18, barely 2 weeks out of high school, trying to figure out which boxes were essential for the dorm room I was supposed to be moving into come Labor Day. Dad was leaning against the refrigerator, a mug of instant coffee steaming in his hand, though the room itself was already too hot for anything hot. He wouldn't look at me. That was the first warning sign. Dad always looked you straight on, even when he was mad about something stupid, like forgetting to take out the trash. "Melissa," he started, and his voice was flat, like a tire going slow on gravel. Mom was at the Formica table, flipping through a glossy magazine, not my college brochure, but a bridal publication, the kind where every dress cost more than a used car. She sighed dramatically, but it wasn't a sad sound. It was the sound of someone being slightly inconvenienced by reality. "What is it?" I pulled the receipt for my first textbook purchase, used calculus $75 out of my pocket. Did the bookstore mess up the shipping address again? "No, honey. It's about the account." Mom finally put the magazine down, smoothing the page showing a multi-tiered cake dripping with real orchids. Sarah's cake, Sarah's wedding. October, huge downtown reception hall. Open bar, the works. I sat down, feeling a sudden chill despite the humid air. I knew exactly which account they meant. The future account. The one with the green bank book they'd started when I was 5, putting away every birthday check, every babysitting payment, every chunk of the tax returns they swore was just for my education. "The 529? Did we miss a transfer? I need the final tuition payment confirmed by Friday," I said, trying to keep my voice light, professional, the way my guidance counselor taught me to speak to financial aid officers. Dad pushed off the fridge. He took a long, slow sip of his terrible coffee. "Look, we had to make a decision." The phrase hung there, heavy and stupid. A decision. Like choosing between chicken or fish. Not choosing whether I, their child, could go to the University of Texas, which had been the plan since I was 12 and decided I wanted to be a lawyer. "What decision, Dad? Did the market drop?" I asked. My hands were starting to shake now. I laced my fingers together under the table, anchoring myself against the cheap wood. Mom spoke up, her voice suddenly sweet, which meant they were about to ask me to forgive something unforgivable. "Sweetheart, Sarah's wedding is going to be beautiful. It's the biggest day of her life, and weddings, they just cost so much more than you think." "Okay," I said slowly. "But what does that have to do with my college fund? You guys already put $15,000 down on the venue deposit. I saw the statement last month." Dad finally met my eyes. They were gray and tired, the eyes of a man who knew he was doing something dirty, but couldn't afford the clean option. "The venue deposit? That was nothing, Melissa. We had to hire a planner, a good one. And the flowers alone are outrageous. Sarah wants peonies, shipped from Holland. She deserves it." "Deserves what?" "Peonies." My voice had gone thin, tight in my throat. I could feel the blood draining from my face. The buzzing of the central air conditioner sounded miles away. "She deserves this day," Mom insisted, tapping the cake photo. "She's starting her life, starting a family. That's important. You're smart. You can figure this out." I didn't ask the question. I didn't need to. The answer was already in the hollow space where my stomach used to be. "How much?" I asked. "Just the number. Give me the damn number." Dad coughed, clearing his throat. "It was $83,400 and change. $83,400 gone. My entire future, the 4 years of late nights, the internships, the student loans I was planning to avoid, all of it, gone into a pit for imported flowers and an open bar that would last 6 hours. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly across the tile floor. My legs were numb. I felt like I was floating 10 feet above the room, watching this terrible little family drama unfold. "You took it all," I whispered. "It wasn't a question. It's an investment in her happiness, Melissa," Mom said, standing up and trying to put an arm around me. I flinched away, hard, like she'd slapped me. "No," I said, the word a flat, dry stone. "It was my investment. It was my account. You swore." "No, we'll pay you back," Dad mumbled, avoiding my stare again. Once things settle down, once the wedding debt is cleared. I laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. It was the sound of air being forced out of a punctured lung. You have wedding debt, Dad? You mean you took $83,000 from my savings, and you still managed to go into debt for a party? You don't understand the pressure, Mom whined, tears welling up in her perfect, well-maintained eyes. Sarah needed this to be perfect. She was so stressed. She's not like you, Melissa. You handle stress better. You'll get scholarships. You'll work. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. That was their final absolution. The golden child, Sarah, the perpetually helpless one, the one who cried when her latte wasn't hot enough. She needed the $83,000 for one day of tulle and champagne. I, the strong, capable one, the one who always did the dishes without being asked, the one who studied until 2 a.m., I deserved nothing but the confidence that I could fix their massive mistake. I withdrew my acceptance from UT this morning, I said, the lie tasting like rust in my mouth. I hadn't. Not yet, but I knew I had to now. There was no way to enroll, not even with massive loans, without the foundation of my savings. Mom gasped. Oh, honey, why would you do that? You had a spot. Did I? I looked at the glossy magazine on the table, at the picture of Sarah, grinning wildly at a champagne flute. No, I guess I didn't. I guess Sarah did. I walked out. I didn't grab my keys. I didn't grab my phone. I just walked, the screen door slamming shut behind me with a violent shudder that echoed the shaking in my chest. The air outside was suffocating, the kind of New Jersey heat that makes asphalt smell like melting tar. I walked for hours, miles, through the cookie-cutter neighborhood where every lawn was perfect and every family looked like they had their lives sorted. The sun beat down on the back of my neck. I didn't cry. I felt too cold for tears. Tears were for Sarah. Tears were for the people who got comforted. I stopped at the corner where the First National Bank branch stood, a squat brick building with tinted windows. I needed proof. I needed the final physical confirmation of the zero balance so I could stop thinking it was a bad dream. I walked in. It was air-conditioned to the point of being painful. I felt the sweat drying instantly on my skin. I went to the ATM, slipped in my debit card, and entered the PIN I'd used since I was 13. The prompt came up. Savings account balance. 000. The screen confirmed the truth. The entire amount, down to the last 78 cents, was gone. A single large withdrawal transaction, dated 3 days prior. I took the receipt. It was flimsy, but it was the murder weapon. I didn't go home. I couldn't face the smell of coffee and floral arrangements. I called my best friend Jenna from a payphone outside a Walgreens. I had to borrow 2 quarters. Jenna, I need a place to crash. Long term, I said, skipping the greeting. Jenna lived in a tiny, overpriced apartment complex near the turnpike, sharing a 1-bedroom with her brother. She worked 3 shifts a week at a bar downtown. Melly, what happened? Did you and your mom fight about the packing list? They took the money, all of it, for the wedding. Silence on the line. Heavy, shocked silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. The whole 529? 80 grand? And change, I confirmed. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, come over. Bring whatever you can carry. We'll figure out the couch situation. I walked back towards my house only to collect my things. I grabbed the old blue duffel bag I used for summer camp, stuffing it with 3 changes of clothes, my laptop, my worn copy of Constitutional Law, Principles and Cases, a ridiculous, hopeful purchase from sophomore year, and the $400 cash I had stashed under my mattress from waiting tables at the local diner during the past year. I taped the ATM receipt, the zero balance, to the refrigerator door, right over the magnet holding Sarah's professional engagement photo. When I got to Jenna's, the air smelled like stale pizza and old carpet. It was heaven. Jenna hugged me tight, not saying anything about the money, just murmuring about how much she hated my mother. Okay, plan, I said, pulling back. My brain felt sharp now, functional. The shock had burned off, replaced by cold, hard necessity. You need a drink, Jenna offered. No, I need income. I need rent money. I need tuition money. I need to replace $83,400, and I need to do it by the time the next application cycle starts. Jenna looked at the stack of textbooks I'd dumped on the floor. Melly? That's insane. That's a minimum of 2 years of saving. Maybe 3. Then I don't sleep for 2 years, I said. The next morning, I was on the street corner at 6 a.m., filling out applications. I hit the diner first. They took me back immediately, needing a weekend closer. Then, I walked 3 blocks to the massive Amazon fulfillment center. The heat inside the warehouse was unbelievable, but they offered night shifts and paid $12 an hour. Done. The third job was the hardest to land, a retail store at the upscale mall, selling high-end men's shoes. It was commission-based, but the hours were flexible around the diner and the warehouse. I needed the prestige and the sales training. I needed to learn how to talk to people who had money, people who could drop $500 on a pair of leather loafers without blinking. Within 5 days of my parents stealing my future, I had a 40-hour week at the warehouse, 25 hours at the diner, and whatever shifts I could pick up at the Foot Locker for rich guys. I didn't call my parents. They called me, of course, a week before Sarah's bridal shower. "Melissa, why haven't you been home? We need you to help with the decorations," Mom chirped into the phone, avoiding the elephant in the room. "I'm working," I said, my voice flat. I was in the break room at the warehouse, smelling like cardboard dust and cheap coffee. It was 3 a.m. "Well, can't you take a day off? It's Sarah's shower. Everyone's going to ask where you are." "Tell everyone I'm paying for Sarah's shower," I said, and hung up before she could reply. I didn't go to the bridal shower. I didn't go to the bachelorette party in Miami that cost more than I made in 3 months. And I sure as hell didn't go to the wedding. October came, thick and gold, and perfect for an outdoor ceremony. I was stacking boxes of cheap imported electronics in the warehouse, the plastic straps cutting into my hands. The shift was brutal. 9 hours on my feet, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the only sound the constant churn of the conveyor belts. My back was perpetually sore. My feet were swollen lumps by the end of every shift, no matter how good the insoles were. I remember standing there, staring at a box labeled Wedding Cake Topper Fragile, and knowing that at that exact moment, my sister was walking down an aisle carpeted in rose petals that cost more than my first month's rent. She was wearing a dress that cost more than I would make in a year. It was in that moment, smelling the metallic dust and sweat of the warehouse, that the anger finally stopped feeling like a hot, consuming fire. It turned into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would take the community college route, maybe work retail forever, maybe just fail quietly. They didn't just take my money, they took my plan. And in doing so, they gave me something sharper, pure, distilled, self-reliant rage. I worked. I saved. I lived on instant ramen and day-old bread from the bakery counter at the diner. Jenna and I became experts at stealing ketchup packets and using the free coffee machine at the warehouse break room. I started studying for the LSAT, the law school admission test, in the quiet hours between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., when I got home from the diner, and before I had to start the warehouse shift. I didn't buy study books. I checked them out from the public library, hauling the massive texts on logic and critical reasoning in my duffel bag everywhere I went. I studied in the park, in the laundry room, under the harsh lights of the warehouse break room while my coworkers played games on their phones. I saw my parents only at Christmas. Sarah and her new husband, Brandon, were there. They looked glossy and expensive. Sarah flashed her ring, a diamond so big it caught the tree lights and scattered them across the room. She talked about their honeymoon in Fiji, complaining about the quality of the resort's infinity pool. "It was just so hard," Sarah drawled, sipping wine. "We had to wait 45 minutes for a drink service by the ocean. 45 minutes. After all the stress of the wedding planning." My mother patted Sarah's hand. "Oh, honey, I know. It was rough. They didn't ask me about my jobs. They didn't ask about college. They just assumed I was taking a gap year and probably working at the mall. They wouldn't have understood the warehouse anyway. It wasn't a place for people who ordered peonies from Holland." When I finally spoke, I kept my voice low and even. "The wedding was beautiful, Sarah. Did you manage to use all the cash gifts to pay down the debt?" The room went silent. Brandon, Sarah's new husband, choked on his wine. "Melissa!" Mom hissed, warning me. Sarah looked genuinely confused. "Debt? What are you talking about? We didn't have any debt. The wedding was fully paid for. I looked at my parents. Dad was staring at the carpet. Mom was white-knuckling her wine glass. "Oh," I said, leaning back, making sure my worn jeans and faded t-shirt were visible contrast to Sarah's expensive silk dress. I must have been mistaken. I thought the $83,400 you took out of my savings account was meant to cover the final costs. My mistake. It must have just been a gift. Sarah's mouth dropped open. "You had $83,000 in savings? Mom, Dad, why didn't you tell me? We could have gotten the upgrade on the linens." That was Sarah, not horrified by the theft, horrified by the missed opportunity for better linens. I stood up. "Happy New Year, everyone." I left before the dinner was served. I walked back to the bus stop, the cold air a welcome slap after the suffocating warmth of their denial. For the next 18 months, my life was a cycle. Diner grease, cardboard dust, retail smiles, and logic puzzles. I learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep. I learned to argue complex cases in my head while I waited for the fryer to heat up. I learned how to deal with the wealthy entitlement of mall customers, training myself to observe their habits, their mannerisms, their casual cruelty. This was field research. These were the people I needed to beat or eventually represent. I was saving hard. Every penny went into a new account, one my parents didn't know about, one they couldn't touch. I didn't touch it either. It was sacred. It was the physical manifestation of my refusal to fail. I didn't just need the money back. I needed more. I needed enough to go to a better school than UT. I needed to go somewhere they couldn't ignore, somewhere that cost more than their entire home. I decided on Columbia Law. Expensive, unforgiving, and 3,000 miles away from their terrible choices. By the time I turned 20, I had saved $25,000. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. More importantly, I had scored high enough on my first practice LSAT to make Columbia a realistic target. That spring, I quit the warehouse. I kept the diner and the shoe store. I needed the flexibility. I started tutoring high school kids in math and logic on the side. Every minute was monetized. I applied to law school early, the application fee cutting deep into my monthly budget. I wrote my personal essay not about overcoming adversity, but about the specific, cold-blooded necessity of self-reliance, detailing how I learned the true value of a contract when my own parents breached the most fundamental one. I didn't name them, but the bitterness was woven into every paragraph. 3 months later, the acceptance letters started arriving. Stanford, NYU, Georgetown. All excellent. All expensive. Then, the final envelope. Thick, heavy, from Columbia. I opened it in the cramped, smelly laundry room of Jenna's apartment building, the washing machine thumping violently next to me. Congratulations. Full acceptance. I still needed money, though. Loans were inevitable, but I needed to minimize them. I needed to prove I was worth investing in. I was 21 when I got the call from the Dean of Admissions. They offered me a partial scholarship, enough to take the edge off the tuition, thanks to my stellar LSAT score and my essay. I accepted. I quit the shoe store and the diner. I paid Jenna 6 months of rent in advance, thanking her for the couch. I bought a one-way bus ticket to Manhattan. My luggage consisted of 2 cheap suitcases and a box of law books. I didn't tell my parents until a week before I left. I called them late after their dinner, when I knew they'd be relaxed and watching television. "I'm moving to New York next week," I said, cutting straight to it. "New York? Why, honey? What about community college? You should stay close," Mom said, her voice laced with the usual false concern. "I got into Columbia Law," I said. Silence. Genuine, stunned silence this time. "Columbia? How? Where did you get the money?" Dad asked, sounding suspiciously curious, like maybe he could still tap the account. "I worked, Dad. 3 jobs for 3 years. I saved. I got loans. And I paid my own way." "Well," Mom finally recovered, a note of pride creeping into her voice, the kind of pride she hadn't earned. "We always knew you were smart, Melissa. See? We knew you'd figure it out. You didn't know anything," I corrected her, my voice low and deadly. "You took my future and banked on my failure. I didn't figure it out. I built a new one from the ashes of your selfishness." I didn't wait for the inevitable lecture about respect. I hung up the phone. New York City was a wall of noise and cold, impersonal air compared to the humid familiarity of New Jersey. The student housing was terrible, small and expensive, but I didn't care. I was there. I was in the library, surrounded by old wood and the smell of ancient paper, feeling the weight of serious history settling on my shoulders. Law school was everything I expected. A grind, a constant intellectual brawl. I excelled. I didn't have time for a social life or dating. My focus was absolute. I went home for Thanksgiving once, lasted 3 hours, and swore I'd never repeat the mistake. Sarah was already complaining about Brandon. The luster was fading fast. He's so immature, Melissa. He keeps trying to play video games when I want to redecorate the guest room, she whined. I nodded, utterly detached. Get a prenup next time, Sarah. She looked horrified. A what? Melissa? That's so cynical. It's practical, I said, taking a bite of dry turkey. And given what I've seen of family commitments, I'd suggest you protect your assets. I spent the summer after 1L doing a prestigious internship in corporate law, pulling all-nighters fueled by cheap black coffee. I was hungry, smarter than most of the people around me, and driven by a bitterness that burned clean. I graduated at the top of my class. I passed the bar on the first try, scoring in the 99th percentile. The firm that had taken me on as an intern hired me immediately, a massive white shoe firm in Midtown Manhattan. They gave me an office with a window view and a starting salary that made my 3 years of scraping by feel like a distant, terrible memory. I bought my first suit, expensive, tailored wool, and my first decent pair of shoes. I moved into a small but beautiful apartment in the financial district. I was 25 years old. Melissa, Esker. I hadn't heard from my family in 6 months, not since I told them I was taking the bar. They didn't even send a graduation card. They were busy dealing with Sarah's ongoing drama. The first call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in court, watching a senior partner dismantle a witness. My phone, silenced, buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. Mom's cell. I ignored it. The second call came 20 minutes later. I ignored it again. The third call was from Dad. I stepped out into the hall, feeling a prickle of annoyance. I answered, my tone clipped and professional. This is Melissa. I'm in court. Make it fast. Melissa, thank God. You have to help us. Dad's voice was strained, panicked. Help you with what? I asked, looking at the smooth marble floors of the courthouse. It's Sarah and Brandon. They're getting divorced. A nasty one. And Brandon is claiming Sarah hid assets. He's claiming half of the business. Sarah and Brandon had opened a small boutique wedding planning service. Ironically, it was mostly funded by Sarah's trust fund, which, unlike my 529, had actually survived the wedding. That's unfortunate, I said, moving towards the elevator bank. Unfortunate? Melissa, they could lose everything. Brandon is suing for everything, and he hired a shark. We need you to look at the paperwork. You're a lawyer now. You can fix this. I leaned against the cool wall, adjusting the cuff of my expensive blazer. Dad, I said slowly, letting the silence stretch. I practice M&A law, mergers and acquisitions. I deal with billion-dollar companies buying and selling other billion-dollar companies. I don't handle messy suburban divorces. But you're family, and you're good. You're the best. You can look at the paperwork. Just tell Sarah what to do. You can do it pro bono as a favor. Pro bono. Free. They expected me to drop my $350 an hour corporate retainer work to save the spoiled princess who had stolen my future, and they expected me to do it for free. I remembered the smell of the warehouse, the raw, aching fatigue, the taste of ramen. I remembered the zero balance on the ATM receipt. Dad, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I have a few questions about the case, just to get oriented. Yes, ask anything. First, I said, watching a flurry of other lawyers rush past me, all in their tailored suits. Did Sarah ever apologize for taking my college money? Melissa, we talked about that. She was under stress. No. Did she apologize? Acknowledge the theft? No, but she was going through a hard time. Second question, I continued, ignoring him. When I was working 3 jobs 6 days a week, Did either of you ever offer to send me $20 for groceries? We assumed you were doing well. You never complained, he stammered. Third question, I finished. You came to me for help when you are desperate. You need a lawyer. You want the best. Do you understand what the market rate for the best legal counsel is? We can't afford much right now, Melissa, with Sarah's situation. I pushed off the wall and walked toward the court entrance, back into the action. I know exactly what my services cost, Dad, I said. And for you, the family that taught me the value of a contract and the price of trust, there is no discount. I paused at the heavy oak doors. Tell Sarah to hire a divorce lawyer who is within her budget, and tell her to watch me. The heavy oak doors smelled like old dust and disinfectant. They didn't swing. They resisted, forcing you to pull. I gave the wood a hard tug and stepped out of the cold, climate-controlled hallway of justice and into the blinding, humid oven of the DC summer. The air hit me like a slap. Thick, wet. It made the silk lining of my tailored blazer immediately cling to my back. I adjusted the strap of my expensive leather bag. A gift to myself after I closed the first major merger that made me partner. The kind of bag that cost more than my first year of rent combined. Dad was still standing back there, frozen in the dim corridor. A small, defeated figure in a suit that looked too shiny, the kind of suit you buy thinking it looks expensive but smells faintly of polyester. Tell her to watch me, I'd said. The words tasted metallic and good, like victory mixed with battery acid. I didn't look back. I walked. My heels, 4-inch stilettos that cost a ridiculous amount but held up better than any cheap pair I wore while waitressing, clicked sharp and clean against the vast marble steps. Each step was a tally mark. Each step was the difference between the 18-year-old girl scrubbing grease off a flat-top grill at 3 a.m. and the woman who now owned the entire floor of her downtown high-rise office. The city noise swallowed me whole. The relentless bleating of a taxi horn, the low rumble of the metro beneath the street, the distant wail of a siren trying to cut through the oppressive August heat. I pulled my sunglasses down, the dark lenses shielding my eyes not just from the glare, but from the possibility of seeing my father follow me, try to touch my arm, try to apologize with hollow words. He wouldn't follow far. He knew better. I had parked blocks away, deliberately. I needed the walk. I needed the physical exertion to burn off the adrenaline that had spiked when I saw him, when I heard his wheedling voice trying to deploy the old family guilt trip. It never worked anymore. The guilt trip died the day the bank statement arrived showing the zeroed-out savings account. The walk was slow torture. The humidity plastered my hair to my neck. Sweat beaded above my lip. But I maintained my stride, controlled and precise. I walked past panhandlers and lobbyists and tourists in bright, stupid shorts. None of them mattered. Only the cold, clean anger inside me mattered. When I finally reached the parking garage, the air was stale and hot, smelling of gasoline and concrete dust. My car, a sleek black German sedan meticulously detailed, sat waiting. It was an armored cocoon. I keyed the door, sank into the cool leather seat, and cranked the AC until it roared. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just sat, breathing in the expensive, chilled air, feeling the rigid tension in my jaw finally start to loosen. My phone, resting in the center console, buzzed. It was Dad. I silenced the call, then Mom. Silenced. Then Sarah's number, which I had blocked months ago, but somehow she always found a burner phone or a friend's line. The texts started piling up instantly. Pleading. Desperate. Guilt. Melissa, we are family. You can't do this to your sister. We just need a few hours of your time. This is destroying her. Think about everything we sacrificed for you when you were little. I laughed. A short, dry, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet car. Sacrificed? They sacrificed my future for a chiffon wedding dress and a venue rental that lasted 6 hours. They sacrificed my stability for Sarah's vanity. I finally started the engine. The car purred to life. I drove straight back to the office. The drive was 20 minutes of heavy traffic. 20 minutes where I allowed myself to replay the moment I walked into the bank at 18, diploma in hand, ready to fill out the transfer papers for the University of Chicago tuition, only to be told by a nervous manager with a sympathetic mouth that the account had been closed 6 weeks prior. A full withdrawal, ma'am. Authorized by your parents. I remembered the physical shock. Not sadness, not immediately. Just a dizzying, cold emptiness in my stomach. A betrayal so complete it felt biblical. I hadn't cried then. I had just walked out and found the first classified section I could. That memory fueled the last 5 years. It paid for this car, this suit, this office. It was the gasoline for the engine of my ambition. And it meant that Sarah's tears now, genuine or manufactured, it didn't matter, were meaningless to me. I pulled into the private executive parking bay beneath my building. The security guard nodded. He knew my hours. He knew I'd be here past midnight. My office occupied the entire corner of the 45th floor. It was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a dizzying, panoramic view of the entire city I had conquered one late night at a time. The carpet was thick, custom-dyed wool. The furniture was minimalist, dark wood, heavy and permanent. The silence here was absolute, broken only by the hum of the server rack hidden in the closet and the rhythmic click of my keyboard. I stripped off my blazer, tossing it over the back of my executive chair. I loosened my tie, rolling up the sleeves of my perfectly starched white shirt. I was breathing hard. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. I walked to the bar cabinet, solid mahogany, imported, and poured a measure of rye whiskey, neat. I didn't drink during work, not usually, but this required a hard reset. I stood by the window sipping the warm, potent liquor, watching the sun begin its slow, brutal descent over the monuments. The city was a glittering, indifferent beast. This office, this view, it wasn't about prestige, it was armor, it was proof. I hadn't just survived the theft. I had leveraged the desperation it caused into a machine of success. I settled at my desk. The stack of actual billable work waiting for me was immense. A massive corporate acquisition, an intricate environmental law case, and 3 pending commercial litigation filings. Work was my refuge. It was predictable. Contracts, unlike family, told the truth. I spent the next 6 hours drowning in legalese, the only sound the furious tapping of my fingers on the keys. I could hear the ghost of my old life whispering sometimes. The clatter of plates at the diner, the smell of burnt sugar from the bakery where I worked the morning shift, the exhaustion that never quite left my bones during those early years. I had done 3 jobs while Sarah was doing engagement photo shoots in Italy. I studied for the LSATs in the back room of a laundromat while the dryers whirred, using the industrial noise as white noise. I paid for community college tuition in cash, semester by semester, then transferred to a state school after winning a handful of academic scholarships that only existed because I needed them to exist. I hadn't just gotten a law degree. I had earned it with interest. Every single minute of sleep deprivation, every lost weekend. The phone buzzed again, vibrating the expensive cherry wood of the desk. My assistant, Maria, had forwarded an urgent email. Subject line, urgently regarding Sarah Miller. Personal. I clicked it open. It was a long, rambling message from my mother, sent at 2 a.m., the time of true desperation. Melissa, your father and I are heartbroken. We understand you are angry, but this is a crisis. Sarah's situation is worse than we told you. Scott isn't just seeking a clean divorce. He is claiming Sarah intentionally misrepresented assets and engaged in fraud related to the business loan they took out for that disastrous artisanal cheese shop. My eyes narrowed. Fraud. Now we were talking. The settlement he is offering is insulting. It leaves her with nothing. Not just the house, which is already leveraged, but her retirement accounts, her savings, everything. We know you are the only one who can handle this. We know what kind of lawyer you are. Please, just meet with her. She needs family right now. She is sleeping in the guest room at our house. She cries constantly. She lost her wedding ring. I leaned back, taking another slow sip of the whiskey. My heart rate hadn't budged. This wasn't a tragedy. It was arithmetic. Sarah had lived a life of maximal indulgence and minimal responsibility. Scott was doing what any smart, ruthless person would do, protecting his assets. I pulled up the public court records for Sarah Miller versus Scott Miller. It took 3 clicks and less than 40 seconds. The initial divorce filing was publicly available, but I used my firm's resources to access the deeper filings. The fraud claim wasn't just related to the cheese shop loan. It dated back 5 years, a shell corporation, tax evasion, and, the delicious detail, a potential misappropriation of funds tied to the original wedding trust, which Scott's parents had started. I froze, reading the document summary. Scott was claiming Sarah drained his family trust before the marriage to cover cost overruns on the wedding that Mom and Dad had promised to pay for. The extravagance, the Italian marble ice sculpture, the live orchestra flown in, the 3-day catered rehearsal dinner. Mom and Dad had scraped my college fund dry, but that wasn't enough, was it? Sarah had needed more. She always needed more. It seemed Sarah hadn't just been the golden child. She'd been an actual financial predator, and Scott was finally tired of paying the tab. I sat back, staring at the screen. The irony was so dense it was almost suffocating. They stole from me to fund a life of luxury and deceit, and now that deceit was collapsing the entire family structure. And they expected me to wade into that mess, that toxic swamp of fraud and stolen money, and pull Sarah out, free of charge, using the very skills I had acquired because they had betrayed me. The idea was almost intoxicatingly absurd. I looked at the clock. 3:17 a.m. I still had 3 more depositions to prep for the morning. I closed the court filing. The whiskey was warm in my stomach. I picked up my phone and opened a new email. I didn't reply to Mom. I replied to Sarah's official contact email, the one her inept public defender divorce lawyer was using. The subject line was simple: consultation request. The body was shorter: Sarah Miller. I have reviewed the preliminary filings regarding your divorce and the associated claims of financial malfeasance. The situation is complicated and requires immediate, high-level legal intervention. My rate for taking on a case of this complexity is currently $1,800 per hour. Due to the high risk and the urgency, I require a minimum retainer of $250,000 paid up front before I open a file or review further discovery. This retainer is non-negotiable and must be wired to my firm's escrow account within 72 hours. Failure to meet this deadline will be construed as a refusal of service. I paused, hovering over the send button. I wanted to add something personal, something that cut deeper than the monetary demand. I typed one final line. I suggest you contact your parents about the payment. They know the value of a solid savings account. I hit send. Then I went back to work on the acquisition case. The corporate world was so much cleaner. People understood the rules. You win or you lose, and the price of failure is calculated in dollars, not tears. The next few days were a deluge of desperate communication. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Maria, my assistant, was intercepting calls from my parents' landline, Sarah's burner phones, and even some obscure relative trying to mediate. They keep insisting you owe them, Ms. Stone, Maria told me, sounding bored. I told them if they want to discuss obligations, they need to schedule a consultation through the standard process. Good, I said, signing off on a $250,000 wire transfer. Tell them my standard retainer must be paid in certified funds. No IOUs. The deadline for the retainer passed. 72 hours came and went. On the morning of the 73rd hour, my mother showed up at my building. She didn't call first. She just appeared, waiting outside the secured entrance, clutching a large, damp handbag, looking utterly exhausted and defeated. Maria called me immediately, her voice low and worried. Ms. Stone, your mother is in the lobby. She refuses to leave. Security is asking if they should escort her out. I sighed. No, Maria. Let her stand there. She needs to understand that the lobby is as close as she's ever getting to my life now. I went to the observation window in the corner of my office, the one that looked down 45 floors onto the street below. I could barely make out her figure, a small dark smudge against the polished granite of the entrance plaza. She stood there for over an hour, waiting, hoping I would relent, hoping the daughter she starved of opportunity would rush down and save the daughter she spoiled rotten. She eventually left, slumping into a waiting taxi. The silence that followed was profound. A day passed, then another. No calls, no texts. The realization must have finally set in. I wasn't bluffing. The price was the price, and they couldn't afford it. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter, delivered by courier. It was thick, heavy, stamped with the seal of the Miller family's estate lawyer, the dusty old firm they used for wills and real estate when they had money. I opened it slowly, sitting at my desk, the evening sun casting long shadows across the pristine wood. The letter was a formal demand, a demand for reimbursement of educational support. They were claiming that since I was successful, I had an ethical and legal obligation to repay them for all familial support expenditures made prior to my 18th birthday: food, clothes, housing, minor medical bills. They had itemized every single expense: $18,000 for my high school education, $5,000 for braces, $40,000 for food and lodging over 18 years. The total demand, $83,457.19. It was an act of pure distilled desperation and petty vengeance. They were suing me for the cost of raising me. I placed the letter flat on the desk. My fingers traced the heavy black ink. They didn't just want to be saved, they wanted to punish me for thriving in their absence. I laughed again, louder this time. The sound bounced off the glass walls of the office. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were starting to flicker on. A galaxy of human activity spread out beneath my feet. I picked up the phone and dialed my personal banking liaison. "I need to make an immediate transfer," I instructed, my voice calm and perfectly steady. "I'm buying the property at 412 Evergreen Avenue. Cash offer. Close within 48 hours. 412 Evergreen Avenue." That was their house. The house they mortgaged to the hilt. The house they put up as collateral for Sarah's failed cheese shop venture. I had been tracking the public sale listings for months, waiting for the inevitable foreclosure notice. They hadn't defaulted yet, but they were close. Close enough that a cash offer, a serious, non-contingent offer, would force the bank's hand. I hung up the phone and walked back to the desk, pulling up the demand letter. I picked up my fountain pen, a weighted, perfectly balanced instrument, and wrote a single short note at the bottom of the last page, right next to the lawyer's signature block. "Dear Mother and Father, please consider the attached demand letter satisfied in full. Effective tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I am the legal owner of your residence. I will be sending a formal eviction notice to your current address, giving you 30 days to vacate the premises." I paused, savoring the moment. The silence of the 45th floor was broken only by the sharp, clean scratch of the pen against the expensive paper. "I have already hired a full-service moving company to assist you with the transition. I trust this is sufficient repayment for the value you placed on my future." I folded the letter neatly, slipped it into a large, expensive envelope, and called Maria's emergency number. "Maria, I need you to personally deliver a package first thing tomorrow morning," I said, my voice smooth. "It's highly confidential. The recipient is my parents' attorney. I want it on his desk before 8 a.m. "Understood, Ms. Stone. Shall I overnight it?" "No," I corrected, looking out at the glittering, indifferent skyline. "I want you to wait outside the firm's office until you see the lights go on. Then, hand it to him directly." I pictured them, crowded into the guest room, exhausted, defeated, arguing over where they would find the money to survive the next week. Sarah broke, Mom and Dad broke, and their house, the very foundation of their comfortable, self-satisfied existence, was about to become mine. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows again. The lights of the city were dazzling. I raised my whiskey glass in a silent, solitary toast. This wasn't just revenge. This was a closing argument. And I had won the case, the property, and the moral high ground. I picked up the glass, drained the warm, smoky liquid, and tossed the ice cubes into a nearby potted plant. I had told them to watch me. They finally were.